what we'll pick up on is more focus on the visibility segment, right? And you'll see as we've talked through this, there's a lot of crossover in between these, but it does help you start those conversations, right? With, well, I thought that was an availability thing. Well, it is, but it also blends into visibility. So we talked about proxy being part of availability, authentication being part of availability, firewall being part of availability. Well, visibility in the world of IT and how I look at it is several things. Visibility means, can I see who's doing what as part of it more from the IT administrator standpoint, from a company standpoint, who's doing what while they're on the network, and then from an end user standpoint, what can I get to on the network? Can I get to my information? What can I do with the information that's relevant to my job? Part of the challenge becomes, as everybody gets more savvy with technology and all these new tools are out there, is that should I have access to certain things? We talk about visibility, is that should I be able to jump onto my corporate network and start bouncing around the network and, oh, there's a server over there, and oh, there's a print server over here, and oh, there's a SQL server over there, and start poking at those things. Good, bad, or indifferent, as an IT guy, and anybody who's in IT, we have some of that skill set that makes us more dangerous. There's a fairly easy way to go through and inventory the network. Should I be able to do that? Probably not. From a security standpoint, if my credentials are compromised, if you act as me, you can do anything you want to on the network. So that's actually where visibility becomes important, because who is this and what are they doing, right? So that's kind of where this plays into. So there's a lot of different pieces within here. We'll talk about DLP, we've got authentication, there's SIM, which we'll talk about, another big acronym for you. We've got forensics is in this space. Then we also have like application performance and NAC, or network access control. We'll kind of talk through some of those pieces. So DLP fits in like with the CASB space. Do you guys know what those two acronyms are? I know it's been acronym soup this morning here.
Oh my goodness.
So any guesses, or have you heard those referenced before?
I know data loss prevention.
Yep.
But I don't know CASB.
So CASB is newer on the scene. It's Cloud Access Services Broker. So it's a fancy, horribly, curmudgeonly, I don't know if that's the right word, but ugly acronym that really means, where is my stuff going when it leaves my network and goes to the cloud, right? And I say the cloud because it's really just someone else's computer. The cloud is just a whole mess of somebody else's computers, but that's a conversation over a frosty beverage. But I see today that those two things go together a lot more tightly, because you're right, DLP is data loss prevention. So that's more, when we've seen that on the egress point or the edge, again, we talked about Blue Code earlier, we talked about force points in that space. DLP has been primarily a nice to have thing. It is not the easiest thing to implement, especially on an endpoint point of view, from like workstations, things like that.
Why is that?
Number one, you got to deploy it, the agent or a piece of software, to all those endpoints, right? So it's like installing any other agent. So whether it's McAfee, whether it's Sophos, whether it's Symantec, I have to push an agent to that. That's one part of it. The second part is, as I talked to in my other segments, is about the strategy and management of it. From a DLP standpoint, what do I care about, right? And if you get overly aggressive or overly assertive with block all of the things, well, that's really tough. A lot of DLP is built out of the box to look for things like credit card numbers. It looks for, that 16 characters followed by, a date stamp followed by 3, right? That's probably, by and large, a credit card number and expiration and the CCV number, right? So we can watch for those patterns. I can watch for 3-2-4 social security numbers. I can watch for certain triggers that would identify it as, hey, that might be something I want to take a look at. You can also train DLP. You can do what's called fingerprinting. So you can feed DLP engines like corporate logos, corporate letterheads, certain keywords or projects. You're not even close to old enough, but one of the ones I like to pick on is, if back in history, the Air Force had a thing called Project Blue Book. It was how they tracked UFO sightings, and it was classified for some time back in the 50s. I'm not even that old. But what it was, you could do something with DLP to feed things like Project Blue Book. So if Jennifer was, sending stuff to, Kazakhstan, you guys check out Project Blue Book, we'd be able to flag that, and so you can feed certain like company projects to it, Or you can watch for certain triggers, right? So somebody says resume or curriculum vitae, I could say, whoa,
why are you sending your resume out?
Exactly.
Or why are you sending these credit card numbers out?
Right. And so some of it is, hey, did you mean to do this? Or was like, oh, wow, I hit the wrong email address, right? That was supposed to go to Jenny in accounting, not Jenny's Gmail. Because we've all seen, Outlook loves to be helpful, right? And
Right.
I'm going to give you an email address. And sometimes in a hurry, we just say, click send and go, oh.
Whoops.
There's a new acronym for it. That is a CLM, a career limiting maneuver. So try and avoid those if you can. But that comes into visibility, right? And so now the thing is, though, is that DLP, for a lot of reasons, has become more difficult to implement. We still see it a lot of the egress, when it leaves my network and goes to the big bad internet. But the problem is of course, with the proliferation of BYOD and VDI, especially BYOD and tablets, I can't actually push an agent to your laptop. I don't own it. From a corporate IT standpoint, if you bring your work laptop, I can't push stuff to it because I don't have control of it, number one, because it's not part of my domain.
Right.
And that's a technical term, not a me making a kingdom term. But I also don't have legal access to it, right? You're accessing corporate data with it. It gets a little bit funky. Some laws have, different provinces for legality, things like that. It kind of depends on the state. Obviously, I am not a lawyer, so check with those things on that. But it's harder to enforce those things, especially on tablets and phones, right? I mean, you can get your email. I can't really do much with that. So that's when we look at how do I do DLP on the egress point before it even leaves the network. Then we got things like Box, Dropbox, Google Drives, Office 365, Smart Sheets, pick your cloud poison. That they're super awesome to allow collaboration. Anywhere I go, there I am, right? I can get stuff from Google Drives. We've got stuff in Slack, we've got stuff in Dropbox. The problem is the corporate environment, like corporate IT, legal and compliance, has no idea where that stuff is. And some of it I get is the fight the ban, I'm going to do things my way, and corporate IT sucks, they're so slow and they're miserable, and I put a change ticket in 7 years ago, and I get all that. I work corporate IT and I get that completely. The downside is that somebody has to know where that stuff is, right? Either from a compliance standpoint, or when Kristen wins the lottery and moves to the Maldives and never speaks to us again, we wish you well, send the postcard. The issue is that do I know where her work stuff went? Where's her work product? Should she be using that? The thing with shadow IT, or what are you going to call it? And that's the whole phrase around cloud is shadow IT, right? Meaning that we can set up our own mail servers, our own file servers. We can set up stuff completely outside corporate by using, our corporate Amex and Swipe, and I can go to Azure, Amazon Web Services, and, well, IT didn't want to do it. Well, I got this, twing, and done, right? So there's no way for them to control that, monitor that, or maintain that. Right? So that's where CASB comes into play. It sits at that border, and where is this stuff going? So now we can start enforcing things like, we'll allow Dropbox, but we're not going to allow Google Drive, or whatever you want. Like, Arrow, we use Office 365, right? So we'll allow Office 365, we'll allow OneDrive, the new Teams, whatever all that stuff is. But no, you're not going to use Slack. Or you can do it in limited fashion. Like we know, for example, Palo Alto Networks uses different tools. So we can say, you can use Smart Sheets with Palo Alto Networks. You can use Box with EMC, because they do that. You can use Skype, with Link for Business, whatever it's called today. It'll be something new tomorrow. But you can use that between these companies, but not that. You can even get as granular to say the C-levels can use Dropbox, they can use this, but marketing, no, we don't trust you guys. You guys do you spend money and all this crazy stuff. And I saw the Ferrari you roll.
Well,
I mean, it was this big, but I saw it. So
at least we have a Ferrari.
That's true. That's true. So DLP is big into there. Then we've got, we talked about proxy and how that's important to visibility and availability. So they're kind of blur there. A big one that we're going to talk about, and I'll spend a little time on it because it's kind of central to a lot of what we do, especially on visibility, is SIEM, right? So
what does that stand for?
So it's SIEM, and you'll see either as System Information Event Management or Security Information Event Management.
Okay.
I've seen it both ways. Primarily when we're talking to be Security Information Event Management, it's really bluntly, it's log collection. There's more to it. I know guys who do SIEM, I get that. We'll go into that. But if you think about it, everything sends a log. You guys know what I mean when I say a log? And I'm not
No.
talking a piece of wood.
Really? Not at all.
So when you log into your Windows machine every morning, so when you control delete or whatever, Windows 10 is different now, but you enter your username and password on whatever device. So it starts doing all this communication behind the scenes, right? So, and I'll use Windows for an example because it's quite noisy and chatty. So I'll use Arrow as an example. So when you log into your machine in the morning and you fire up Outlook, first thing it does, so you send your username and password, your credentials, right? You authenticate to what's called domain controller. Your machine talks to domain controller about 50 times in the first minute. Who am I? Where am I at? What time is it? Does my time lock up with you? What do I have access to? What does my security profile look like? What rights do I have on the network? Okay, I've got that done. That spits logs between your machine and the domain controller, which is a server, right? Then you start Outlook. So then Outlook fires up, and we all know Outlook takes a long time to start up. Well, Outlook then talks to the Exchange server behind the scenes. That's the actual mail server, is called Exchange. So you're talking to Exchange, you're doing the same thing. You authenticate with Exchange. Here's my username and password. Here's what time it is. Hey, I'd like to open my mail store now. And Exchange says, okay, who are you? Yep, all right. Yep, you're Jennifer Flanagan. Okay, let's check your security. Yep, you're good. All right, here's your inbox, and here's the 2,517 emails in your inbox. Here's your calendar invites, bop, 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 bop. And so Exchange writes all this to a log file, right?
So it's like a giant text conversation going
That's
back
exactly
and
what
forth
it is.
and then reporting
Yep.
on it. Okay.
Yep. And so firewalls have logs. So if you go to HBO.com, I can actually see behind the scenes. It's all just straight text. This IP went here and this IP went there, and IP port, protocol, source, destination, things like that. I can see all that. And so when you go to the firewall, your laptop talks either via wireless or wire connection to a switch. You guys know what a switch is, right? In the closet has all the Ethernet cables in it. A switch talks to the router then connects to the interwebs. You see where this is going. Every one of those devices spits out logs, right? Well, that's interesting. That's useful. The real question is, why do I care, David? Well, individual on those devices, if you don't care, then you're not getting a whole lot of value out of it. The power comes in as I take all those logs and I point them to a central location, and I correlate those logs across the entire environment. That's what SIM does. So I take your workstation logs, I take firewall logs, I take router logs, I take switch logs, and I put them together because they all have a timestamp, right? And so I can get way down deep into like microseconds or picoseconds in some cases. And I can then create a clear picture of, hey, Kristen came in, she logged in, hit the Exchange server, hit this website, and then all of a sudden traffic started going to Kazakhstan. What's going on here? I mean, are you doing something bad, or is your laptop infected? Because then I can see, source and destination IP addresses. And all the technology we put in place helps to, stop those things. We got firewalls at the edge that can block those things. But if they can work together and see that complete picture, it gives me way more visibility, because now if I see your machine, if I take you just as a unique, isolated use case, what did you do? I don't do anything, all right. Well, then if I see that her machine is doing the same thing as yours and it's logging, and so is his machine, and their two friends, and their two friends, and their two friends, pretty soon I can say, I have an infection, right? I've got something that's going on. Or I've got servers that are doing weird things. Or I can see the outside coming in and where it's splattering on the network. So you'll see there's the big players in here are Splunk, who's up and coming. You've heard of Splunk, right? HP with ArcSight is big in this space. RSA Security Analytics is in this space. You got IBM QRadar. There's a lot of them out there. CellOps, who's now FortiSIM. Logarithms in this space as well. So SIMs become a big piece, because without having that centralized control, all this disparate information is just noise, right? Your phones generate logs. When you use your iPhone, connect to corporate wireless, it's spitting logs as well. So that lets me see the complete path and flow of it. If it seems a little Big Brother, a little scary, it kind of is, but it also lets us protect the network from a pure visibility standpoint. Along with logs, what we're seeing in today's modern SIMs is actually network traffic, or they call it packet capture. And so not only are we seeing where you went, we can also see what you did while that was happening. So for a complete Big Brother scare, I can actually record and replay your voice over IP conversations. I can recreate your email. I can recreate PDFs you sent, because even if you shred your laptop and throw it away, if I've got the network traffic, I can recreate that. That's the beauty of it. And again, Mileage may vary depending on the country you're in, laws, et cetera, federal government, all those caveats still apply, but those things are available to us. And that leads into more the forensics piece of it, you know. So if somebody does hack or crack a network, if they catch them, they've got the forensics evidence to replay on that. Or from the standpoint of, hey, I've never seen that weird piece of malware on your machine. I'm going to actually take that and rip it apart. What did that do? Why did it do the thing it does? So that plays into visibility because what is happening, right?
Right.
Authentication is interesting. We're seeing a bigger uptick on that from a visibility standpoint. And authentication has been kind of like, who cares so much? What is authentication? You know what I mean when I talk about authentication?
Isn't that like when you log into your machine?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's basic authentication, right? Username, password. You are you. Maybe.
Well, but what happens if someone took my username and password and tried to use it?
And softball, whack. Beautiful. So I am you. If I
Yeah.
have your username and password, I am you.
Right. So how can we
So that's
preserve?
so there's a whole lot that goes on with that. And the super sexy acronym of the year is UBA or IAM, but User Behavior Analytics.
Okay.
Or Identity Access Management. See, you guys bring a notebook to write all your
I
stuff.
know, taking notes over here.
Yeah.
But
really.
so authentication has traditionally been a major weak point in networks. One of the biggest, easiest ways to effectively ramp up authentication strength is with two-factor authentication, and you've seen that. If you've ever used the key fobs, the tokens, RSA is big in that space. Obviously, they kind of owned that space for a lot of years.
Right.
The gray key fobs that were out with the number changes on them.
Yep.
They're software tokens. So that means there's two things, right? Two-factor. It's something you have, a physical thing, and something you know, which is your password. So to your point, if I separate those things, the chances are far, far, far lower. I mean, nothing is uncrackable, but if I take your token away, because that number randomly cycles every 60 seconds. There's a whole lot of scary math behind that. But if you don't know that number and it changes every 60 seconds, I can have your password all day long. Whoopity-doo. Conversely, if I've got your token and the numbers change, whoopity-doo, right? It doesn't matter. I can also remotely kill those tokens. We've seen tokens go away from the hard tokens to software tokens. They can be on your phone. If you've used Google's two-factor, you know, when it sends you the 6-digit number that you have to put in there, that's two-factor authentication, right? Because it says this is only good for a short amount of time. You know, go get it. I think Capital One does it on the app for their phone, things like that. That's two-factor. That's great, but there are still scenarios to where either people don't want to use two-factor because they just don't want to. I'm going to pick on doctors and lawyers because they're the worst at it. That's where we don't see a lot of adoption two-factor in those environments because it's something they just don't like to do, right? They think it slows them down or it's just something they don't want to implement. That's when we get into more now what's called identity access management or user behavior analytics. That looks at more, it fingerprints you or it baselines you what your normal behavior is. So good example, I'll use myself because I can pick on me. But also I travel frequently for work, right? So home office for me is Denver, Colorado. And so what happens is the system begins to learn you using a whole bunch of algorithms and heuristics. It says, all right, normally, you know, David logs in between 7:45 and 8:15 in the morning, depending on traffic. I'm from an IP address in the Denver area, and my machine is a Windows 10 machine. I've got Office 365 on it. I have Skype for Business. I have XYZ, and I've got this MAC address, etc. Right? So there's a bunch of variables that it goes into, and so over time it learns me. It says, okay, yep, yeah, cool. David's in, and so I might just have to use my normal, username and password. It might not ask me for anything else because it says, I know you, I trust you. Especially if I'm in the building at work, right? It says, hey, you're on an arrow-controlled IP address. We've seen this machine. Y'all look beautiful. This week would be a good example, right? So we're out here in lovely Santa Clara where it was 85 degrees yesterday. I'm never going home. But it was one of the things like we went to dinner last night in the city and we got back and I fired up my laptop at 11:30. You can set the system up that says, wait a minute. All right, you look like David. This laptop looks like his laptop, but it's 11:30 at night in California and this IP address is something we don't recognize at all. So why don't you answer me a couple more questions? Either I'm going to send you a 6-digit code to your phone that you can then put in, or maybe I'm going to ask you something that only you would know. And you guys have seen this on banking websites.
Right.
What was the name of your best friend when you were a little kid?
Yeah.
Mike. What was your first dog? What was the color of your first car? you can even do things from public knowledge, so it'll actually pull from public records. What was the street address where you lived when you were 14 years old, or on your first, mortgage application? Did you own 5012, Flower Top Lane, or was it 5201? So you have to look at it was this one. So that's step-up authentication. And so you can learn those things over time. That way, if you do get a new laptop, sometimes you have to retrain it because it's like a new laptop, but it is one of those things that's nice to have. It's a little more invasive, but it's kind of one of those things tough, I guess, especially in 2017. We've seen how much people are going after these things, so it's much more important to say, who are you? And that goes along with identity access management as well. So along with those things, and I'm in the network, right? We know you, we trust you, you are Kristen. We're pretty sure you're Kristen. You look like Kristen, you talk like Kristen, you walk like Kristen. You're on the network, but now we start seeing, what are you doing? You're in marketing, all right, but why are you iterating through Windows file shares? Why are you, running port scans on the network? Why are you banging on corporate stuff, like our global data centers in Melville, New York, right? What business do you have? And I'm not saying that you don't have business, but why would you do those things? Are your credentials compromised? Or are you just poking at things? So are you an insider threat? And I know how scary, I'm sounding super negative right now, but you do have to look at that, and that's part of background. As security guys, by nature, we tend to be suspicious and untrusting. I mean, I like you ladies and everything, but we do look at it from that aspect, because if there is an insider threat, the damage is done. So IAM looks at what should you be doing, and so it has profiles to say, all right, if you're a marketing person, then you should have access to Salesforce, CRM, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, this Excel spreadsheet, maybe these file shares in this SharePoint site.
Sure.
You shouldn't have access to root file shares of Windows boxes. You shouldn't have access to the Melville data center network at all. So then we can actually move those things in and out. And it especially becomes important, not so much with onboarding, but when people either change jobs or leave. Because how many times, you've been in an organization to where you change jobs and you have to have new permissions or new roles and things like that. How many times do you think that your old permissions are ever deprecated? If you think it's more than one, you'd be wrong. It hardly ever happens. They just add permissions on to you. So especially it becomes a problem with long tenured employees. Pretty soon, if I've been at Arrow for 10, 12, 15, 20 years, I probably have access to a lot of stuff. Do I need that? No. And am I a problem child? I mean, as far as my boss knows, no, I'm good. But if somebody were to compromise me, either blackmail me or threaten me or something like that, could I be forced to do things and give up the network? And that sounds a little scary, it sounds a little over the top, but it is a realistic thing, especially in the federal space when you do have targets that can be compromised or human capital that can be leveraged. So those are things to think about. And IAM helps you look at those things that as you move jobs, those roles can be automatically applied. So we're seeing a lot more interest in that. And again, it goes back to strategy. Who are you? Where do you sit? What type of businesses are you in? And what's your appetite for risk? Going along with that, so see how all this ties together?
Yeah.
So now I know who you are, I know where you are, I know what you're doing. If this sounds like Big Brother, you're not totally wrong, but that's kind of the world we live in now. We also look at things when devices join the network. Should they be allowed to join the network, right? So BYOD is the coolest thing ever, right? Bring your own device. It's awesome. I can work from anywhere. If you really think it's that cool, I would say think about that. Because I can work from anywhere. And then you realize that I can work from anywhere. My boss will call me at 3 in the morning because I can work from anywhere. But the upside is that, great, honestly, we can work from anywhere from pretty much any device. That's great. That goes back to that same thing is when I'm on the network, if I'm authenticated and I'm an IAM user and I'm all legit, do I trust my devices or should I be allowed to do that? Should that device be allowed to join the network? So if you have enough savvy, you could go to your hotel computer and log in with SSL VPN and get on the network and ta-da! So we want to talk about network access control. That's another part of visibility, right? NAC, N-A-C. And NAC was kind of a dead category for years. You guys heard of NAC, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, just now, maybe?
Yeah, well, that's fine. So NAC is one of those things that was a really cool idea, but it was really hard to implement. It's getting a lot easier now. So what NAC is it interrogates the devices and who are you and should you be on my network? So you guys know what a jailbroken iPhone is, or jailbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I can actually then, if you're a jailbroken phone, nope, not so much. Maybe we're an Android only company. And so I can say, if I see an iPhone on my network, nope, maybe I'll let you go to the big bad internet, but that's it. I can actually classify what are corporate assets versus foreign assets, or non-corporate assets. When I say foreign, I mean I don't own them. So if you come into my network with a corporate device, I can interrogate it. The MAC address is unique to each device, and say, okay, you're corporate, I'll let you do this, you're this, you're this. So even if I know you're Kristen, I know you're Jen, everything matches up, that's not an approved device. So maybe if you're using your personal iPad or your personal laptop, and y'all come in the office and, well, my work laptop, I forgot it, whatever, or it's dead, IT's got it. Maybe I'm only gonna let you go to Outlook Web Access. Maybe you can only get to Salesforce, but I'm not gonna let you use some of the internal tools because it's real software that needs to be loaded, right? It's a fat client or whatever it is. I'm not gonna allow that to happen. I can also then decide, hey, that certain thing is gonna be in this profile. So if you look like a Windows machine, you get this security posture. If you look like a Mac, you get this security posture. If you're an Xbox, you can go on the internet. That's basically all we're gonna do, so we can shove it out that way. So that's where all those things come into for visibility is, who are you, where are you going, what do you have access to? So they play in together. So you see all these things kind of go together on that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.